everybody. We're going to get started, just because I know everybody wants to get to a bunch of sessions today, so we don't want to run over or anything like that. Thank you guys so much for attending. How's everybody's South by going? Oh, come on. Let's try again. How's everybody's South by going? Nice, nice. How many people came from cold weather? Awesome. Today's a good day for all of us. Well, thank you guys for coming to this session with Nathan and I on the new age of story. We're going to be talking about marketing for a visual world and specifically diving into visual storytelling and how to really impact your audience. My name is Amy Balliett. I'm the CEO and owner of Killer Infographics. Killer Infographics is a Seattle-based company. We are considered one of the leading visual communication agencies in the country. We have been around since 2010, and over the course of the 7.5 years or so, since it was the end of 2010, the 7.5 years or so that I've had my company, we have expanded our services beyond just infographics to a variety of other services as well that all center around this idea of marketing for a visual world. We work with a broad range of clients, primarily Fortune 500s, but we do a lot of work with nonprofits and educational institutions and government as well. And over the course of the past 7.5 years, we have donated $4.5 million in services to nonprofits in need, because it's really important for us to get visual content into the hands of people who can make a great impact. Oh, thank you.
You guys are the best audience.
I know. Keep it coming.
You guys got levels on me? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Great. Okay. So, definitely can hear me now. That was just a warning. So, my name is Nathan Clendenin. I'm the founder of StoryDriven. We're an Emmy award-winning storytelling firm. We specialize in short-form documentaries for the life science. We specialize in short-form documentaries for the life science and healthcare sector. We tell three kinds of stories: human stories, product stories, and company stories. And our clients use these stories for raising capital, gaining market share, and for galvanizing their organization around achieving their vision. We've been around for nearly a decade telling stories for our clients, and along the way we've earned recognition from our peers in storytelling. We're proud of our Emmy Awards because they are journalism awards. They speak to the authentic, human-centered approach that we take. Before we go any further, though, I have to confess something to you all. I have a pretty serious addiction. I'm actually a clarity junkie. I can't get enough of it. When I don't have clarity, you don't want to be around me. Fortunately, the only known side effect of this is extreme excitement when you're high on clarity. So our goal today is to make all of you clarity junkies as well, if you weren't already.
And really, when it comes to that, we want to talk about how visual storytelling truly can clarify everything. And when you're thinking about marketing, when you're thinking about connecting to your end audience, in today's world of information overload, your audience is searching for that clarity as well. They're searching for a clear message. They're searching for understanding as fast as humanly possible versus taking a very long time to dive into your content and read it to know who you are or what you do. And that's really where visual storytelling and all of the different products of it come into play. So when you think about marketing today, 89% of marketers focused on content marketing as their main form of getting their message out in 2017. Now, that said, they had to be very careful about what type of content marketing they were doing, because today's audiences are only reading 20% of the text that is put in front of them when that is more than 600 words. When it's less than 600 words, they're still not reading 100% of it. Today's audiences skim and they look for the headline and the image associated to the headline to decide if they want to dive deeper into your brand story, your brand message, or any of your marketing collateral. And this is because 91% of consumers today prefer visual content over any other form of content that you can be creating. So if you're a content marketer, you have to really be considering the use of visuals. And in 2017, 85% of marketers relied heavily on visuals to get their message out, whether that be ebooks or social media micro-narratives or video or infographics. They focused on visuals to tell their story in the best possible way. And in 2018, they expect to increase their use of visuals and increase their budget towards visuals. And this is really where visual communication comes in. Earlier, you heard me refer to Killer Infographics as a visual communication agency. That is a very new term. Well, it's a new term in the marketing industry. It's a term that's been around for a very long time, and it's had many definitions. But over the past 8 years or so, this is the core definition of visual communication. Visual communication graphically represents information to efficiently and effectively create meaning. And this last sentence is the most important. When necessary, limited text is used to explicate that meaning. So to give you guys an example, how many people here have seen an infographic where you have paragraphs of text next to images? Okay, that's not really an infographic, because that's actually a reading assignment in the end. The idea of visual content and the idea of it being a real game changer in content marketing is that you can get the information through the visuals first, and then after the fact, you can read the text to glean more information about the subject matter that you're interested in. If you do this properly, you're going to be presenting content that is meant for our brains. Our brains are hardwired to interpret visual information 60,000 times faster than any other form of communication that exists. This is based on 20 different studies, with the first one being done in 1970, and it hasn't been debunked since. The 1971 is the one that said 60,000. Studies since have been saying up to 100,000 times faster. So visual content is the best way to cut through the noise. And that's why today's marketers are relying heavily on visual content to connect with their audiences. But simply producing visuals and throwing them out there without a cohesive story will not succeed. And this is where visual storytelling comes in. It's a product of visual communication. And we want to talk really about how visual storytelling affects the brain and how you can use that knowledge to change the hearts and minds of your audiences.
So our brains are amazing organs. They're actually quite complex. Scientific discoveries about the brain are growing every single day, and we've learned a few things. What scientists have discovered so far is that our brain really is wired to take in stories. So right now I want to share 5 ways that our brains are wired for visual storytelling. So the most powerful thing to know about all of this is that tension is what keeps our attention. When there's a question posed and left open, we have to stick around to find out what happens. Now, the easiest example I always give for this is if you are watching a reality TV show. It could be about a family that's famous for being famous, but you don't actually care about that family. Yet when you see the show, they've posed some sort of question like, will the paparazzi take over this froyo joint in the middle of Kim's hanging out with her friend? So as soon as they pose that question, now we have to find out, even though really I don't care, and I don't really want to care, yet my brain says you will find out. And that's the power of great content in general. The next thing is that our brains love novelty. We like new things. When we see something new, we have to check it out because it might be information that can help us survive. A new perspective, a new idea, or a new image. Your brain is excited by novelty. It's one of the reasons why we're all here, to learn new things, right? To get excited about the novel world around us. So the third thing is that our brains, and this is very evident here at this conference, are taking in so much information, terabytes of information if you had to translate it, every second. So our brains can't make sense of all that. We can't store it. We don't know what to do with it. So our brains tag things that have a high emotional quotient, saying this is important, and we throw away the rest because obviously we don't need to worry about that. And so as you are communicating, if you are communicating with a story, you have a higher ability to raise the emotional quotient and therefore make your message memorable. The fourth thing I want to share is about empathy. So empathy is formed in our brains by the hormone oxytocin. Some people call it the moral hormone. Good stories actually produce this chemical in our brains. It's what makes us feel good or satisfied by a story. And so that leads viewers to more empathy, which leads them to altruistic actions. Those actions could be making a donation to your cause. It could be supporting your business's mission through buying your product or using your service. Okay, this is where it gets into actual hands and feet taking action. And then the final thing that's really powerful is that our brains are so well wired that when someone is telling you a story, your brains actually begin to sync up. There's like a 1-second delay, but if you put an MRI machine on both of your heads, you would see the same waveforms traveling across, which is so amazingly powerful. So, I mean, just think about it right now. As we're here telling you our stories and sharing our things in a storytelling format, all of our brains are beginning to sync up. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, so as we're talking about this, if the brain is hardwired to interpret visual information faster than anything else, and the brain is also hardwired to react and respond to storytelling in such an engaging way that it really drives action, if you focus your marketing and your content efforts on powerful visuals that also drive this narrative, you have a much better way of connecting your brand to your end audience, driving traffic to your site, driving engagement in social, and so on. So let's talk about that, though, because I'm talking about how you can reach your audience in visual storytelling, but the fact of the matter is there are different objections to visual storytelling that both Nathan and I hear on a regular basis. And so we want to talk about these objections a little bit. Nate, what are some of your objections that you hear the most?
So one of the things I get when we're talking about what we do, or if somebody has seen a video that we've done, is, oh, that story is cute. You know, that was a cute thing, but we actually need results this time. So let's do the other thing, which is basically a glorified PowerPoint on a video. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like fun.
One thing I hear often is I don't have budget for it, or I want to use a DIY tool instead because I have a phone in my pocket and so I can create a story by just recording it with my phone, or I can throw some stock images together and call that a story. You know, these are common objections that we hear. Now, what do you say to those objections when you see them?
Well, I mean, as we're going to talk about, I think you have to have empathy for the person you're communicating with, and you know, a business person who's in charge of a budget and needs to see ROI on that budget, they want things that are tangible, and in a lot of ways storytelling isn't as tangible. That's exciting.
We'll pretend that didn't happen. Not carbonated. Keep going.
You know, we're in this presentation, we're making storytelling tangible, but through talking about the brain and all of these studies that show things, but to their minds, it's just sort of fluffy and they don't understand it, and so they're afraid of it.
Yeah, and when it comes down to the common focus of we're trying to connect with the end audience, we're trying to get them excited about your brand, if you're not telling a story, how are you supposed to get somebody emotionally reacting to your brand or your service? So stories in everything that we do. Even from the beginning of starting a company, you come up with a core purpose, and that core purpose should be centered around your mission and vision, and that's the story of who you are. And all of your marketing materials should be propelling that story forward. But it can't be cheap, and that's the problem right now. We were talking about this earlier today, and Nate did a really good job of pointing out that we see so much wonderfully produced media on a daily basis, thanks to HBO, Netflix, Showtime, AMC, etc. There's so much powerful media that hits us every day that our expectations keep going higher and higher and higher for the type of content a brand will deliver to us. And when that content is a lower quality piece of content, it actually can send a poor first impression of your brand. A study from HubSpot that was released recently suggested that custom imagery converts 7 times better than stock imagery. Yet marketers are still relying on stock imagery because it's really quick churn. It's really easy to just cut and dry, grab a stock image and paste some text onto it. But custom imagery is your way of really propelling a story without words, without having to rely on that text.
So we've talked a lot about the brain and storytelling and visual communication, but the rest of this presentation, we want to put this stuff to the test. We want to knock down these objections, and we really want to answer the question, can visual storytelling clarify everything for you? So the first thing is, will your audience actually listen to you? Can you get in front of them and get their attention?
Yeah, and so with that, when you think about will your audience listen to you, sometimes you have to go out of the box. There's a lot of ways to tell a story these days, but what you don't often see, especially when it comes to marketing videos, you don't see live action and animation mixed together too often. So the idea of will they listen to you, sometimes you have to go outside of the box. You have to do something different. For example, there are 10,000 infographics released online every single day. Only 1% succeed. 99% fail because they're status quo. So part of what you have to do is go beyond that status quo. So I want to show an example of an explainer video that goes beyond status quo, that's focused on growing conversion rates for the Sonosite website. When it comes to this video, they wanted to show off their process. They wanted to show why their process was so intricate and why you could rely on their services and trust their brand. But they didn't just want to film their employees working on their process and testing their machines. Instead, they wanted to find a way to make it stand out so people would stop and listen. And this is where visuals can really elevate that story. So I'll show you this as an example, and purposefully this is 90 seconds, because a good explainer video is 90 seconds or less.
Sonosite's tradition of reliability continues with our certified pre-owned ultrasound systems. We revitalize pre-owned machines by fully disassembling each unit down to its individual components and performing a careful inspection of each item. This rigorous 10-point inspection ensures the reliability and precision of your ultrasound system. It starts with a device history analysis, including not only the records associated with the original manufacturing, but also any customer-reported service events. From there, we run a comprehensive suite of tests, updating software with the latest patches and upgrades. Wherever necessary, components are swapped out for the most up-to-date hardware. And finally, a certified sonographer ensures the precision and reliability of every ultrasound machine. A comprehensive 12-month warranty backs up the entire process, so you can focus on improving patient outcomes. Sonosite pre-owned ultrasound devices. Durability, reliability, ease of use.
So the idea of something like that is really focused on a 3-act structure, introducing the problem first, and then showing the solution, and making the hero of it the machine. The people element that's added to it helps to drive that emotion and drive that trust. And so when you're thinking about ways to get those visual stories out, if you can find ways to take a traditional method of storytelling delivery and elevate that, it's going to stand out and help people listen further. Now, if you're going to be creating something like a motion graphic or a video like that, you got to consider the fact that there are 3 types of motion graphics that exist. There's explainer videos, there's promotional ones, and then there's emotive. And the 3 can overlap sometimes, but explainer videos often explain a unique process or service. They take something that is really difficult or hard to understand and try to humanize it and make it easier to comprehend and take in. A promotional video is going to put the product at the forefront and get somebody really excited about going out to buy that product. It's often very B2C. And emotive is something you'll see next. Actually, we both have emotive videos that we'll be showing. But emotive is about pulling at the heartstrings and making the audience the hero of the story. And that's the most powerful that you can do. If you can create visual content that makes your audience the hero, that's content that will be shared. That's content that gets other stories being told. And it's content that makes people more loyal to your brand. So we talked about whether or not they're going to listen to you. But the next question is, will they remember you? And with this, we're going to go beyond video. We're going to talk about multiple pieces of content that you can be producing to drive memory, to get people constantly recognizing your brand or service. Few things worth noting. Visual content is something where 90% of the information we retain is visual in nature. And so that's another reason that pushing forward this content visually makes a big difference. But something that I mentioned earlier where I said you need a good first impression. First impressions are based 94% on design first. So that means the layout, the color palette choice, the illustration style, the font choices. You have to be intentional about every single one of those choices in the content you produce. If you're not intentional about that, it can send a very bad first impression of your product or service. So I want to walk you through that. And to do that, I want to introduce a brand that I talked about last year at South by Southwest. It's a brand I'm very passionate about, so whenever I get the opportunity to share it, I like to. It's an organization called WeCount. WeCount started in Seattle, where my company is based, and it basically came as an answer to the state of emergency that exists in Seattle right now, where homelessness is at an all-time high. Seattle is a big economic divide of haves and have-nots. And WeCount came up with a way of letting the haves use the share economy to help the have-nots and to help people out of poverty. And so we partnered with WeCount to create a full marketing campaign to help them get their message out and stay remembered in the Seattle community. Because Seattle is also, I don't know how many of you are from there, but it's a bit passive-aggressive. We get excited about something for an hour, and then the next hour we forget. And so it's very important to kind of keep sending that message and driving that message home. Also, there were 3 target audiences. The target audiences included the homeless community, to let them know that this service existed, the social good community, to give them a reason to promote WeCount, and then everyday people who had something that they could give to a homeless person in need. So those were 3 very diverse audiences, and we had to find a way to connect with each. So we started with the idea of story. And with that, I'm going to show you a video, and surprisingly, I just realized it's the same voiceover artist as the one you just heard.
Many in the homeless community own a smartphone or laptop. Some hold full-time jobs. Others had a place to live just a few months ago. The only difference between us? A personal community of support, a safety net. From 2011 to 2016, King County saw an 84% increase in people living outside and unsheltered. In response, Seattle has declared a state of emergency on homelessness, allowing the city to deploy important resources faster. But what if offering and asking for life-saving help was as simple as opening an app? WeCount enables those in need to ask for outdoor gear, home goods, and personal care needs. Giving someone a backpack might not end homelessness, but it could start a conversation that secures social services and saves a life. That means you can make a difference, and together, we can become a safety net.
Now, if any of you remember the description of this session, one of the things mentioned is that today's marketers are using 12 to 14 types of content to get one goal accomplished, to connect with their audience on one message. And so just leading with a video isn't enough. So our next focus, and this is something that you can be doing if you're on a budget, and you can be doing if you want to connect with people without having to spend a lot of time and energy in putting that content together, is creating what we call social media micro-narratives. These are two separate social media micro-narratives. They're sized to fit perfectly on a normal Facebook post or in a tweet, or you can make them landscape for LinkedIn or something like that. But the idea is come up with one stat, one tagline, one specific message, and pair it with that visual that brings about that emotive response. And so you can create a lot of content like that, and you'll find that it is shared more widely on social media than a simple photo would be. But if you have a budget, find a way to go out and get photos yourself as opposed to stock imagery, and then let those photos speak for themselves by putting just a few lines of text on. Think about a billboard. A billboard tells everything. It tells a full story in 6 words or less. And you can be doing that with social media micro-narratives. The next thing we focused on with WeCount was getting this information in front of the right audiences. And that's not always online. You have to consider that as you're doing visual content marketing. It's not something that's just digital. It can live offline just as easily. And with WeCount, we really wanted to get ads out in newspapers that we knew the homeless community frequented. There's even a newspaper sold by the homeless community called Real Change. And so we worked on getting an ad in Real Change so that they could see that. We then focused on putting ads on buses in 2 areas of Seattle. The ride-free zone, because we knew that's what the homeless community mainly used to get to and from. And then the Amazon campus, because we knew, hey, these people have money, and they can donate to people using WeCount. And then also brochures. But if you notice through all of those, there are so many repeated images. When you're creating visual content and telling a visual story, it's actually much more successful if you're going to focus on repeating images, not creating something entirely unique every single time. And so with that, consider creating a visual language first. For whatever your goal is, create a campaign around it that focuses on a very intentional visual language that pushes that story forward. With WeCount, for instance, we chose to use ambiguous characters because we didn't want any potential stereotypes to come across when it comes to the homeless community or the donor community. We wanted everybody to feel equal instead. We focused on a line art illustration style because we knew that we wanted to lead with photography, but not just any photography. We actually were lucky enough that the WeCount team had partnered with a photographer who used to be homeless. And that photographer went around the homeless community in Seattle and got photos of people who are really well known, people who help newly homeless get into shelters, people who help newly homeless join the Real Change newspaper and other programs. And so we were able to get these great photos, but the photos were intentionally smiling or intentionally hopeful. We didn't want any of the photos to send a negative message because everything you do should be intentional. Everything should be about pushing that story forward. The other big thing when it comes to this type of content is we chose colors that we knew would connect with a Seattle audience. And even the photography is black and white to bring a somberness to it. So it's not just about the actual written story when you're producing this type of content. Every visual choice you make should propel that story forward in one way or another.
So we've talked about getting in front of your audience. Will they listen to you? And we talked about, will they actually remember you later when it's important? And now we want to continue to ratchet up the stakes here and talk about the most important thing, which is, will your audience trust you? Okay, this is important, especially in today's world, right? We There's a lot of companies we don't trust because they've broken our trust. And without trust, you don't have a relationship with your audience, and you don't have any loyalty, which is going to be bad for your business. There's a saying about trust that says it's won in drops and it's lost in buckets. So it's very important that you continue to build trust with your audience and with your customers over time. And the most effective way I know to build trust is something that's both simple and also a little risky. It's called telling the truth. And in the storytelling world, you do that through telling an authentic story that has some vulnerability to it. So I wanted to share an example that would illustrate this in action. We have a client called Innovata. They're a cancer genomics company. They have developed a liquid biopsy test that is it's not on the market yet, but it's going to completely change the way doctors treat cancer and other diseases. Like any new startup company, they needed to raise some money, quite a bit of money, in fact, in the millions, multiple digits, millions of pounds. They needed to convince potential investors quickly that their company is worth investing in. They needed to build trust with new potential partners. So they approached us and asked us to tell the story of the first patient that they ever helped. It sounded like a slam dunk, honestly. It was amazing, really cool story about saving lives and changing an industry. But there were some complications. First, the patient did not have long to live. Their test had helped gain him much time, but his cancer was continuing to mutate, and so we didn't know exactly how long he was going to be around. Second, the patient did not want to be identifiable. He wanted to remain anonymous on the video. And third, actually gaining access to the patient proved a little bit difficult. We had to go through his doctors, and they, of course, had a million things going on besides talking to us about a patient. So it took a while to pull the whole thing off. So I'll let you see how it turned out, and then we can talk about some of the results.
I had really a nice life. I never thought at the time that I would be sick. The only thing that I had that was a bit strange is my coughing. The first doctor I consulted told me I had sinusitis. Then I was told that I had gastric reflux. Then I was diagnosed with asthma. One day, while I was sleeping, I had a very strange dream. I had something within my chest, and this thing within my chest was growing and was preventing me from breathing. The next morning, the first thing I did was to consult a lung specialist. The doctor told me, "You've got a mass in your lung. It's a question of months, or maybe weeks. You should write your will."
Many patients with these advanced cancers unfortunately don't have too long to live, so delays of weeks or months in terms of getting people to the right therapy can really impact not just the amount of life they have left, but the quality of the life during that time. Today, many patients rely on tissue biopsies to be able to guide their therapy. But we know that in patients with widespread disease where there may be multiple different pieces of cancer across the body, taking one piece of tissue is not going to give you a whole picture of what's going on. And that's where techniques like liquid biopsy, where you actually get to survey the whole of the patient's cancer, can provide a real additional benefit.
Ultimately, the physician's ability to help a patient comes down to what information do they have at their fingertips about that patient's disease. That information is readily accessible at the genomic level in the patient's blood. At Innovata, we've developed a liquid biopsy that from a simple blood draw actually allows the clinician to gain insights into what's happening at the tumor level. This knowledge empowers clinicians to understand their patient's cancer and guide which treatments they should pursue.
And so the first thing that we did was a solid biopsy. Unfortunately, the solid biopsy was inconclusive. So we were in a therapeutic situation where we didn't know what to do. My oncologist recommended that we do a liquid biopsy with a laboratory situated in Cambridge.
One of the most interesting stories at Innovata has to do with the very first patient we ever tested. And what drove it was a clinician in a cafe in Paris, France, at a conference, looking across the table at myself and our chief scientific officer, Nitzan Rosenfeld, and literally saying, "When are you going to test my patient? And I trust in your results. I trust and believe in your assay. When can you test my patient?" And it really was a call to action for our team. That very first patient had an actionable mutation. Patient was treated, responded beautifully to that treatment. In fact, the patient has personally told me, "I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for your test result."
This test, in fact, triggered a change in therapy, which gave me almost 18 months of progression-free survival until my cancer was mutated again.
Of the several thousand patients that we've tested to date and the samples that we've analyzed over time from these patients, what we see is an even bigger opportunity to impact their care by monitoring them over time. That's where the company's really headed.
We can tell whether patients are getting better or worse on treatment, so we can give reassurance that patients are on the right therapy if that's the case, or give confidence to be able to switch therapies to other ones if patients aren't responding.
On my side, I've always thought that knowing was helping me to survive and helps me to build trust. If there is no trust, there is no survival, because you need to believe in the treatment you receive to fight for it. The liquid biopsies give me visibility. We're not guessing anymore, and we can make an informed decision.
Now that we have the tools to elucidate what's happening at the tumor level from blood, combined with this breadth of therapeutic availability, I think it really offers a hope that we can truly transform cancer care into a more manageable disease and give that patient the best shot at survival.
So now, after watching this, you understand the impact that Innovata's liquid biopsy is going to have on treatments for diseases like cancer. And you feel a little bit of empathy for their first patient. Maybe you know someone who's struggling with cancer, or you have personally. But I want to tell you a little bit of how this played out for the company. You can see that the inciting incident for this company they were willing to share was a vulnerable moment. They weren't ready to do the test yet, but their doctor of this patient met with them and said, "You must do this now." And they were willing to share that vulnerability, and in doing so, build trust with their audience. This is the kind of authenticity that allows you to build trust with an audience, because they see that, oh, these are real people. I can relate to them. Another big theme in this video that I wanted to point out is time. You know, this test gives you valuable time back, and so we wanted to represent that visually, and so we emphasize that by shooting all the patient's footage in slow motion. So we represent him gaining back time. Everything's half speed. And then we represented the lab footage, the doctors and scientists in regular speed, showing that the speed of their progress, that they're making progress forward on this. And then it was a little bit of a happenstance, but it worked out great. We ended the video in London with Big Ben, this giant clock tower, in the background as just a subtle reminder about this theme of time. And the one thing I wanted to share about this video that maybe wasn't expected, but was a really powerful force, was that after making this video, our client, all of their scientists across from Cambridge to the United States, it really galvanized them together. They were like, wow, we helped this guy on the very first time out of the gate. What we're doing is important. If you've ever been part of a startup, you know sometimes it doesn't really feel real what you're doing. It's just like, hey, what are we doing here? And it really galvanized them around them to the point their board actually said, we are a mature company. We are ready to take this to market. So we've talked about getting in front of your audience, making your message memorable, and then building trust with your audience. But before we wrap up, we wanted to share just a little bit about how to put some of these things into action.
Yeah, so we really want to kind of dive into some key things that you should pay attention to. First of all, if you're thinking about doing motion graphics or any type of visual content that might not be a long-form narrative, but you have to tell a story in a short amount of time, follow the 3-act structure. This even works on infographics. Every infographic we produce has an intro paragraph first, and that intro paragraph is that first act. It's that problem statement, but it's the visuals that still pop through first. And so you get that problem statement, and then you dive into the actual next step, the how is this product or service going to solve that problem? Or maybe you're doing a white paper or a thought leadership piece. You still need that story arc. So always focus on an arc in some way, shape, or form, and it's usually that 3-act structure. The next one is, of course, keeping it custom, keeping it original. It's not just about the text on the page. It's about what propels that text forward to really draw that emotion. And then we also want to kind of run you guys through a litmus test of whether or not what you're producing is a story. So with that, I'll let Nathan take it.
Cool. So as you know, nothing happens in a vacuum. We don't just sit around and say, let's tell a story today. There's always something that comes in the form of a need. We need a poster, we need a video, we need to sell more widgets, we need to raise more money, etc. So you probably have something like that going on in your workplace right now. And I wanted to give a little bit of help in that scenario to see, can we make this into a story? Is this a story? How to navigate that scenario with some kind of confidence. So the first thing is you have to ask yourself, who is the hero? And that begs the question that there must be a hero. We, as humans, we connect to other humans. And so we don't connect to your product or your service. We actually connect to other humans, seeing their faces, seeing their emotions. And so you need a hero, and that hero has to want something. Now, we all want lots of things. We want a better job, we want a family, we want recognition, we want new shoes. But in this case, your hero can only want one thing. You need to be very clear. What is that one thing? Because that one thing is what drives them. And it's going to be communicated in whatever you produce if you can be really clear about nailing down that one thing. So let's make up a hero real quick. I've thought of a person named Jamie. They're a South by Southwest attendee. And what does Jamie want? Well, they want what all of us here want. They want a great experience at South by Southwest. And that's good. But that's not really specific enough. I want to take it to the next level. So they want to learn about marketing and communication from the brightest minds in the industry. Okay, now that is a desire hopefully all of us can relate to. So now that we know what the hero wants, there must be obstacles. As we talked about earlier, the tension is what keeps our attention. And so the obstacles create that tension. Jamie wants to get a great experience, but there's stuff in the way, right? So those obstacles could be external problems. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many speakers and talks and venues. I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. There's too much. Endless options are actually paralyzing. Will my time be worth all the effort and expense to get here? Are you feeling the tension yet? So the last question that I'll share today is, does your audience relate to the hero's desire? Have they experienced the same obstacles? Because ultimately, you want your audience to see themselves in the story that you're telling. They should have empathy for the hero because they share the same desire and they've experienced the same pitfalls and struggles. So an example of Jamie, our South by Southwest participant, you as the audience, do you resonate with that? Is that something that makes sense? Do you desire the same thing? Do you have the same conflicts? So unfortunately, this is all the time that we have to share about this. But I wanted to just close this Jamie story before we do that. So luckily for Jamie, there's actually a South by Southwest app, and they can mark their favorite talks and then get automated, intelligent recommendations based on that. They can keep track of their calendar and their schedule for them and just wipes those obstacles out of the way. And Jamie can gain what she wants, which is expertise in marketing from the best minds in the world. That's a success.
South by did not pay us for that. But that's the idea of visual storytelling. It should bring clarity amidst all the chaos in our world right now. And when you're thinking about that, there's always a way to bring your brand story forward. Just think of your core purpose as a brand. Think of what makes your brand unique to anybody else and tell a story around that and let the visuals propel that. As a couple freebies for everybody, we're giving away some ebooks so that you guys can get more information on here. So Nathan has a great ebook. It's the question of, is this a story, as a great quiz. So definitely check that out. And from my team at Killer Infographics, we've also got a couple ebooks that we'd love to give you guys. And if you have any questions for us, we're at booth 225 tomorrow, so please stop by and ask any of those questions. Of course, we'll be doing Q&A here for anybody who wants to stick around.
And if you missed any of those links, they'll be on our social profiles. You can.
Yeah, we'll put the links up on social as well. And then if you have any other questions directly, you're welcome to email us as well. With that, does anybody have any questions that they would like us to answer? I know everybody's rushing to and from. Yeah.
So there's a mic in the back there. Yeah.
Or I can repeat what you say if you don't want to go back to that mic. It's up to you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Perfect, great. Hi, my name is Heather. I'm with Rockwell Automation, which is a B2B kind of entity. And so I'm different than a lot of people here. And so one of the specific questions that I have is, when you're in a technical realm and I represent marketing, one of the biggest challenges is trying to communicate, I'm going to call them how-to videos because I don't know what else to call them, right? To your point, like explaining in an 800-page instruction manual or a 150-page PowerPoint is a little thick. But sometimes, honestly, it takes that because it's so technical and nobody else has that knowledge beyond the developer. So we want to start doing a better job video and storytelling-wise, but in a how-to manner. Can you give me some examples and recommendations that you would have?
Of course, yeah. I mean, in a situation like that, a lot of the story that you'll be telling will be on screen. It'll be showing, not telling. The trite phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words, is so true. And so, like that Sonosite process, that was a 500-page manual. Yet it's a 90-second video all wrapped in because of all the visuals that carry it forward and show the process in action. So when you have a situation like that, if you can show it and not tell it, you're going to have it come across much faster. But at the same time, everybody is different, just like you said. Every single client we have a different kind of solution for. If you want some free advice, I'm happy to sit down and look at what that process is and tell you exactly how I would tell that in a story.
Love that.
Yeah, feel free to just email me and I'm happy to share that with you. Or we can sit down at some point.
I would also say, even if you're in a very, what seems like dry content, we're all still human, we all still have our emotions, we all still want something, even in that context. And so if you can think about, you're explaining maybe on page 5, you're explaining this certain feature and how it works. Well, that solves a problem, which means there was a tension, which means there's a desire before that. So just tapping into that desire, making it more explicit, will help them see why I need to pay attention at this point because, oh, yeah, I need to solve that problem.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, there's one guy that was right ahead of you. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I'm like digital director. I'm from Mauritius. We speak 3 languages in Mauritius. How do you convey the same message in the same space in English, French, or whatever third language?
Oh, that's a great question. We're constantly doing multiple languages for our clients. Especially like Microsoft is a great example. They have products everywhere, they have clients everywhere, they have customers everywhere. You have to rely on universal iconography. Universal iconography is universal for a reason. It speaks the same language no matter what your verbal language is. And so as a good example, when you think of a heart means love. A heart means like, it means caring. It's an emotive visual. And so that would mean the same thing in Paris as it means in America, as it would mean in Japan, because it's a universal image. So we really do focus on that universal imagery and finding ways to rely entirely on that to get a story across, versus imagery where it doesn't make sense without reading. And that's the whole idea of visual communication. It's about creating those illustrations that tell the story before anything else, because we all see it the same way. So that's a really good way to get across. Now, at the same time, sometimes you might have just a very detailed white paper, and you know that it's going to have to be translated into multiple languages. With something like that, consider breaking up the text with visuals. A good rule of thumb is every 100 to 200 words should have a visual. It makes it far more digestible. If you can't do that, then at the beginning of each section, create an infographic that summarizes that section, because that will help get around those language barriers. You had a question, you've been waiting in line? Yes.
My company is building our brand, so naturally they're very, very excited about the brand Bible and brand consistency. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how to balance it, the need for visual brand consistency and the palette you pick for your brand versus the varying needs of campaign to campaign, different audiences and messages and the needs that they might have for different colors, visuals, etc.
That was a great question. So I'm just going to say this out loud for the people who didn't hear. The question was, so her company is building its brand right now, and they're really focused on staying as dedicated to that brand as possible, but how do you balance that when different campaigns might need an extension of that brand, or might need even entirely different brands? And so I know that we're going to have slightly different answers here. With Killer, because we work outside of, we don't just do video, you do award-winning video. But because we do all of these other pieces of content, we're often having to marry a bunch of brand guidelines. And we have a lot of clients that have, multiple brands based on their products and based on their services. What you have to do is find a color palette that can complement the original color palette. Maybe you take one color from the original color palette. I'll even give this as an example. The StoryDriven brand and the Killer brand, we had to find a way to put our two brands together for this presentation. So we used the Killer Infographics blue and the StoryDriven green and created that gradient. And then the illustration style we used throughout was the Killer Infographics illustration style, only because we have a defined illustration style, because that's kind of, if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to say we're the company we are. Whereas Nathan's company doesn't need a defined illustration style. So we found these ways to marry our brands together, but often it's coming up with that illustration style that can kind of speak across the brands or elevate that current brand a little bit more. It doesn't always have to be that same illustration style if you're using the same color palette. So you can choose that one thing to change or tweak that helps differentiate that campaign from another campaign. And that's a good way to go. And again, feel free to email me. I'll send you examples. Yeah.
I'll say, too, about your brand. The way I best think about your brand guidelines, and it's how do you want people to feel about your company? It's not only the font and the color, it's those emotions. And so it's necessarily a fluid thing. Or like companies are organisms, and they grow and change and adapt to the world around them. And so there is a tension, right, between wanting consistency so that you're not confusing people about who we are. So you don't just change your colors on every different thing or change your font, right? Because then you're communicating chaos. But also being adaptable, that like things change. We're growing, and as long as the emotion of how people feel about your company stays consistent and matures, then I think you're in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, in the 7.5 years I've been in business, we've gone through 3 logos. Four logos. And it was really about, as we grew and evolved as a company, our brand had to evolve with us. And so our logos changed, our colors changed. Our old colors, our first logo was a bleeding eye because we were called Killer Infographics, and the I quite literally bled from the K to the infographics. It was the worst. I designed it in like 10 minutes. It was the biggest mistake ever. So, I mean, your brand evolves with the company, and so you have to allow for that. And there's always going to be that small little element of the brand that continues and prevails. But in today's day and age especially, letting it evolve is the best thing to do because everything's constantly changing anyway.